How's Mother, Brian? I see your lips moving, but that's about it. You're on mute.
Yeah, it's a challenging time. They're doing a very good job at Constantia, but it's very isolating, and hopefully they'll keep the numbers down there. So we just have to decide if we're going to keep her there.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people are struggling with that.
Appreciate you asking.
Sure. Okay, so let's get started. We were in the middle of just this chapter four in Sugei HaSimanim, the different kinds of simanim, and we learned yesterday that you have to do whatever you can to create the opportunity for the person who lost the item to provide a siman. Um, and we also learned that if you find it in a yeshiva or a beis medrash or a place where people are God-fearing and learned, then sometimes you can surrender the item even if it doesn't have a good siman, but it's a used item, and someone would be able to recognize it just by eyeballing it, based on the fact that they've used it a lot and so forth. So then the last part, or the two final points. What if two people come forward and each one says it's theirs and they both give simanim? So, do you cut the baby in half? So what do you do in a situation where two people claim it's theirs? So he writes as follows: Shnayim shenasnu osam simanim bechayfetz, ein meshiv. And if two people come forward and say that the item is theirs, and they present simanim, you do not return it to either party. Ela ibkaid echad moda l'sheni, o shiyasu pshara beinehem, o shiyavi echad edim. So you can only return it under the following conditions. Either one finally relents to the other. The two people who come forward, finally one says, fine, you can have it. Or they make some kind of negotiation between the two of them where they say, please surrender it to us and we'll figure it out between the two of us. And they make some kind of, they'll sell it and they'll split the difference. Oh, shiyavi echad edim, or that one party, you say, listen, I can't surrender to both of you if you're not in agreement, unless one of you brings witnesses who can testify that it's your item. Okay. Now, that's if all things are equal. Im nasnu simanim shonim, but let's say each one provides a different kind of siman. Machzirin lemi shenasan simanim muvhakim yoser lefi ra'os einei hadayim. So then you should return the item to the person who gives the better siman, or the more specific and the descriptive siman, because that's a sign that he's the true owner. Now, Shnayim shehiviu edim shechayfetz shayach lahem yehimuna chad sheyavo Eliyahu. If two people come forward and each one brings witnesses that it belongs to that guy, which is maybe not as unlikely as you would think, because maybe at one time it belonged to Ruvain and at another time it belonged to Shimon. So each one of them brings witnesses that it's theirs. Okay, v'im echad mehem amar gama simoneha nechleku haposkim im zocha benesinas simonim. But let's say both of them bring witnesses and only one of them can provide simonim. So that's a machlokus in the poskim, whether that provision of simanim gives him added strength over witnesses. So that's a machlokus. Now, nasan echad simanim va'afilu muvhakim va'asheni hevi edim machzur l'misha hevi edim. If one person provides simanim and another person brings edim that it's his, so that edim trumps simanim. That's the general rule. And even if they just testify that it's his item, and they don't testify that it fell from him, that they saw it fall from him, but just that it's his, that's enough to award it to that person. Now, obviously, there are going to be mitigating circumstances. What if a person brings witnesses that it's his, and the other guy says, yes, but you sold it to me? Okay, so that's going to have to go to a beis din for the Beis Din to sort of try to untangle the different claims. And so, but that's the general rule. Okay? And then finally, in the last thing that we'll see in this chapter is machlokes bein hamotze liba'olim. That toin bal haveda keneged hamotze shechaser chelek me haveda. If there's a dispute between the finder and the owner, let's say the finder puts up a sign that he found a wallet, and everyone is free to come and claim it if they can provide the simanim, provide the ID, or provide what it looked like, or a money clip or something like that with cash in it. Okay, so and then the fellow who it belongs to comes and claims, yes, this money clip is mine, and the cash that is in it is mine, and he gives him the proper siman on the money clip. But then he counts the money, and he discovers that, hey, there's a $20 missing. There was previously $250 in bills in this money clip, and now there's only $230 in this money clip. What happened, man? And so he creates a dispute. He says, you're not giving me back the full amount. So that's the example that I'm giving. A bag of money that is missing, or any kind of money holder that is missing cash. Or let's say the owner says, you're giving me back a defective item, and when I lost it, it was not defective. It wasn't broken. So you must have broken it. So the guy says, listen, I'm just trying to be a good person by returning the item. I didn't know that it was broken, so therefore, halachically, hamotze ne'aman. There is no claim against the finder, and the finder does not have to prove his innocence in that situation. And if
I guess, Rabbi, he would just be saying, this is how I found it.
Yeah, he could say, this is how I found it. Now, the guy could say to him, well, I see clearly that it's been tampered with, in the last day or so, because the wires are still warm, or who knows what he's going to say, right? Maybe he could claim that only the person who found it could have tampered with it, or something to that effect. So, nonetheless, even in situations where the claim indicates that it was the finder who tampered with it, the finder is not cannot be incriminated for that, unless he confesses. But if he says, no, I didn't touch your money, I didn't play with your appliance, so then he cannot be taken to Beis Din or stand accused.
Rabbi, is that the halacha because we want to promote people to return lost objects and we don't want to put a stumbling
block?
block?
You asked that question, Paul. So take a look at footnote Lamed Daled. This is a direct quote from the Shulchan Aruch, and he says, "Upater af mishvua." He doesn't even have to take an oath. V'hatam shepatru mishvua, and the reason why the rabbis exempted him completely is the chashushu shim yechayevuhu yaniach hametzia v'yelech lo kidei shelo lishava. He says is because, like Paul says, they were worried that a guy who sees an item and is going to worry that maybe he'll be accused of having tampered with it, because when he finds it, it's already broken. He's going to say to himself, or in some other way defect, he's going to say to himself, what do I need the headache of finding this item and then be accused of having tampered with it, or taking some of the cash? Who needs this headache? And people are not going to bother to return lost items if they know that they're going to have to take a vow or be summoned to court or whatever it is. Uvetoyin haba'olim shera'a shahamotze higbiyas aveda b'shleimus v'cha'is meishiv chelek. He says, what happens if the owner says that I saw the person who found it pick it up and it was whole and unbroken, and now when he's returning it to me, I see that it's broken, it's defective. So obviously he must have used it because it broke while it was in his possession. So das hasma shechayiv shavua. So the Sma is of the opinion, that's one of the commentaries, says that in that case where he's making that claim, so the finder can be taken to court and be ordered to take a shavua, to take a vow. Ach yesh cholkim shegam b'chai gavna pater. But others argue, the Taz, and other poskim say that no, that you don't have to, even in that situation, because again, a person is going to worry about the headache, because if he knows that there is a possible claim that the owner can make that will force him to go to court, he's not going to bother. He's not going to bother. In other words, we are concerned. We want to make this process as hassle-free for the finder as possible. Okay.
Rabbi, one more thing. I presume it's not carte blanche, so the person is still, if he actually took 20 of the dollars from the 250, he's liable to Hashem for theft. Like, it's not like he's got away with it. It's just that he can't be accused of the individual to whom he returns it.
Correct. He's not allowed to. He's not allowed to take $20. What we will see is that there are times when the finder is allowed to demand compensation for the expenses that he put into taking care of the lost item. Let's say I find your lost dog, right? It's wandering around in the street in my neighborhood, and it's got a dog tag on it that the animal lives in Tobacco. Is that how you pronounce it? And so obviously it's not from around here, and so I call the guy, and he says, "Well, I'm out of town. I need you to hold on to the dog for another week until I get back." So I say to the guy, "Okay, so what am I supposed to do with your dog in the meantime?" Well, he says, "Well, this is his favorite dog food," and he tells me where to buy it, and so I'm allowed to give him a bill at when he comes back, and I'm allowed to tell him this is what it cost me to keep your dog. Oh, and by the way, your dog tore up my my favorite couch. There are going to be instances where the finder can bill the owner for the expenses of holding on to his lost item, and we're going to actually see that in the Rav Shulchan Aruch when we get back to the Rav. We'll go back to the Rav Shulchan Aruch now. So. Let's see. Okay. Let me just bring up the Rav Shulchan Aruch now. Give me 1 sec. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so we're up to Chaf Beis. Hichriz o hodia. So a person made the public announcement, or he notified as many people as he could, and as we learned before, there are different ways to do this, but he got the word out. V'lo ba'u haba'olim, and the owner did not show up. So what is he supposed to do now? Tehi ha'aveda munachas etzlo ad sheyavo Eliyahu. He has to keep it with him until the coming of Elijah, meaning that he can't do anything with it. And we saw that if a person finds an object without a siman, sometimes he's allowed to sell it. And as far as if he finds an object without a siman and he can ascertain that there was already yeyush, so then you're allowed to keep it, right? But in this situation where either you're not sure whether there was yeyush when you found it, or it has the siman, so you have to leave it with you until the coming of Elijah. And we also learned from the Igros Moshe, the Rav Moshe had said that in most instances, if it's a burden for you to hold on to it, you just have to note its value and then you can sell it. because then by noting its value and marking it down, getting an actual appraisal sometimes if necessary, you will be able to make restitution to the person who lost it by giving him the cash equivalent. And therefore you're not allowed to use it or to sell it. Ela imkain michirasahi tovas be'aleha, unless you can ascertain that it is beneficial to the owner to sell it. For example, if you find something perishable, so holding on to it until it rots is not in anyone's interests, right? It would be much better, it would be much better to sell it so that at least the guy can get a return on the thing that he lost. Kigon shenifsedes. So such as an example that it's perishable. That's the example that he gives. So therefore, yimkarena bebeisdin. Therefore, you should sell it in a beisdin, or you should sell it in the presence of a beisdin, or with the beisdin's blessing. So, as the Imrei Yaakov over here says, yimkarena bebeisdin, kain pasak hashulchan aruch siman reish samach zayin siv chav dalid. Aval harama hevi b'shem yesh omrim de'ein sarach beisdin b'yachal lashuman ulakhan ba'osan hadamin. He says it's not, you don't necessarily need a beisdin according to the Ramah, because that may be an extra burden on the finder, and therefore you can just estimate its value by getting the best possible estimate that you can. Do your due diligence and estimate its value, and then you can sell it, or you can actually purchase it yourself and put aside the money. And the reason why the Ramah is more liberal and he allows the person to exchange it for cash, to sell it without using a beisdin, is because we assume that since he's going to this measure to be a good guy in the first place and to try to do hashavas aveda, then we don't suspect him of trying to cheat the owner of its value. Okay. V'chein mishtamish bo l'takanasa. And furthermore, you're also, when you find something that's perishable or that needs to be maintained in some way, you have to maintain it. Ketzad. So let's give an example. Hamotze kli eitz mishtamesh bahen ma'at l'tzarchan kidei shelo yirkavu. If you find wooden utensils, and that may be eating utensils, it may be any other kind of tool. So a lot of times, if you just leave something for an extended period of time, it may start to deteriorate. It may start to rot, and sometimes using it, using it with your hands, actually maintains its cleanliness. Will help to the oils in your hand for wooden items will actually provide it with the necessary moisture and lubrication that wood needs to prevent it from becoming too dried out or to possibly rot. So therefore you have to utilize the utensil for its intended purpose on occasion. And klei nechoshes mishtamish bahen bechamin. And similarly, a copper utensil also requires utilization so that it doesn't start corroding on its own. And so, if you use it for, let's say, heating up items, so then it will, heating up water. Let's say it's a copper kettle. Okay, so then if you don't use it, it could start to corrode. So therefore, use it as a kettle, from time to time, so that it actually helps the utensil. Avolo yasim hakli al gabe ha'or mipnei shemashchiko. But you shouldn't use it in such a way that it'll cause the item itself to get worn out or diminished. So, for example, you can use a copper kettle to put hot water in, but you shouldn't heat up the copper kettle over a flame, because that causes when it's copper, it'll cause the flame will actually cause the copper to erode, in some way. In other words, every time you put the kettle on the flame, a tiny, tiny little layer of copper melts away. And so therefore, you have to use it, but use it in such a way where you minimize the amount of wear and tear on the item. Klei kesef mishtamish bahem bitzonein avalo bechamim mipnei shemashchiran. So therefore, for example, silver utensils, you should, to prevent its tarnishing and corrosion, you should use it, but only with cold liquids, because if you were to put hot liquids in it, it would cause a tarnishing of the surface. Kardumos v'chayotze bahem mishtamish bahem be'itzim rakim avalo bekashim. He says, let's say you find someone's axe, so you should use the axe for soft wood. It's like if you don't use an axe at all, it eventually starts to become blunt. So it's helpful to the axe to chop things with it, but only softwood and not hardwood. Because if you use hardwood, it's going to cause it to in some way be diminished, over the course of time. And klei zechuchis lo yishtamish bahem klal mipnei shenishbarim. If you find glass utensils, you should not use them at all, because since they're very fragile, you may end up breaking them. V'chein klei zahav, and similarly when it comes to golden utensils, which the gold is a very soft and malleable metal. If we allow you to use it, it may get dented and damaged. And I guess we're not worried about gold utensils because gold tends not to corrode in any way. Ukesus shal pishtan, and similarly, if you find linen garments or linen fabric, you should not use it at all. Because like gold, linen does not get ruined when you put it into storage. But let's say wool or cotton, for example, if you just put it away in storage and you don't end up using it, it could potentially get damaged just by its being dormant and not being shaken out or used over the course of time. I know with wool, we discovered this when we moved here. In California, you don't have as many wool-eating moths, but I've had some garments eaten through by moths since we moved here, and so you have to get mothballs or whatever it is. In other words, basically you have to do whatever you would normally do to your own possessions to protect them, not to use them for their utility, but nonetheless to use them so that they're protected and maintained. Okay. Let's see. So therefore, like the Imrei Yaakov says in Sadi Aleph, he says, Pirish, Shaharei kol mashi hitarnu lihishtamesh imam hu mishum shezehu litzorchan. He says, we only allow you to use the item to protect the item itself. She'im yatmin osam v'lo yishtamesh mam yavo lidei kilkul, because if you don't use them, they're just lying in a drawer or in a closet could actually contribute to their damage. And therefore, with golden utensils and linen fabric, which can be stored away indefinitely without anything happening to them, so then you should store them away and not use them at all. Okay. Okay. See if there's okay. All right. Let's go on to the next sif. Okay. In Chav Gimel, he says, "Aval ksus shel tzemer." If you find a woolen garment, so tzarech lena'ara pam echas b'lamed yom. You have to shake it out. If you just keep it in a drawer, that's not enough. You have to shake it out and air it out once every 30 days. V'lo yena'ara b'makel, v'lo b'beis b'nei adam, ela adam echad biyadav. And when you shake it out, you have to be careful. Don't use a stick, like to beat it, like some people do, when they beat their carpet. And also, you shouldn't shake it out with two people, but only with one person. And the reason is because two people might stretch the item. right? In other words, these are all guidelines, of course, as far as how to maintain an item that you find. V'shotcha al gabe hamita litzorcha bilvad avo litzorcho ulitzorcha. He says, and you can spread it out on your bed like a woolen blanket or something like that, but only if that's beneficial for the item. But let's say it's a win-win. Let's say you say, well, listen, it's good for the item for it to be used, and it's good for me because I get an extra blanket. He says that you're not allowed to do. Why? Because Shema yishkachen al gabi hamita v'tiganev. Because maybe you may forget about it. You'll leave it on the bed, and something may happen to it. It may get stolen. It may get damaged. So you're only allowed to keep it out of storage if it's beneficial exclusively to the item. Now, nizdamnu lo orchim lo yishtachena afilu litzorcha bilvad shema yignevuha. Let's say if guests come over, then you should not take an item that you found and that you'd like to do hashavas aveda with and display it for your guests. And the reason why you're not allowed to do that is because you have to worry that someone may eye it and steal it. And you may say to yourself, oh, come on, no one's going to steal from me. These are my friends. I trust them. So he gives a second argument, which is, Oshema yitnu ba'ayin hara. Or maybe they'll place an evil eye on it. He writes that in parentheses. He says, even that is a form of damage. If someone will look at it and say, oh, you lucky stiff, that you found this, and maybe the owner won't come forward and you'll get to keep it for yourself. Let's say it's a valuable painting or something like that and you find it. You shouldn't display it in front of your guests. You're going to create jealousy. Someone may be tempted to steal it from you. Someone may be tempted to do something else with it. And someone may give it an ayin hara. Okay. So, as far as this halacha is concerned, what do we make of this concept of ayin hara? So the Likutim brings an interesting discussion from the Chazon Ish about what an ayin hara actually is, so I think what we'll do is we'll save this idea of ayin hara for tomorrow, because I do want to address it, because some people may say, oh, come on, what's the issue of ayin hara? There's no such thing as ayin hara today, or is there? Okay, so we'll save that Emir Hashem for tomorrow. We'll take a look at this piece in the Likutim. Questions, comments? Okay. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Shkoyach. Chodesh Tov.
Yes, Chodesh Tov. Don't forget, if you're going to the 7:30 minyan, it starts at 7:15.